Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry organized a conference from the 28th to 29th November 2013 on the Continental Free Trade Area matters for Africa. 21 heads of national chambers, representatives of sub-regional business associations, and industry experts came together to reflect on the program of activities required to address the key constraints for boosting intra-African trade. Wazir Omulu, president of the Ethiopian Chamber of Commerce, opened the conference with some welcoming remarks.
Thank you. Today, I really feel happy to see you here, all Africans, most of Africans who really care for Africa, with our African friends. As the world is one today, we are here to really care for Africa, as Africa is one of the globe.
His Excellency Prime Minister Hailemariam Desalegn of Ethiopia welcomed the participants of the conference and made general remarks about boosting intra-African trade.
Coming to the theme of this conference, I must say that it is a great honor to be invited to address the African Chambers of Commerce conference focusing on boosting intra-African trade. This is in fact a recurring theme in the last few AU summits, testament to the huge importance African countries attach to the topic.
Following the remarks from the Prime Minister, Fatima Haramasil, African Union Commissioner for Trade and Industry, expressed pleasure at the theme of the conference.
It is indeed a great honor and pleasure for me to address you today on the occasion of the 2013 conference. My pleasure is even greater when I see the theme chosen for the conference, namely the Continental Free Trade Area matters for Africa. I feel through it the support and commitment of the Chamber of Commerce and Industry, the true movers and shakers to make the initiative come true. Also, as your conference comes on the eve of the WTO Bali conference, where we will be pressurized to enter into deals that are not so beneficial for developing countries, the outcome of your two-day reflections here will surely give us a more ammunition to resist the pressure.
Alan Kiramatin, coordinator of African Trade Policy Center, ATPC, at the United Nations Economic Commission for Africa, outlined the process of implementing the two landmark decisions of the African Union on establishing a continental free trade area and boosting intra-African trade.
Based on the experience that we've had with these previous continental frameworks, which don't seem to have gained enough traction to give us the results that we wanted, the AUC, the UNECA, and then other development partners sought now to develop a comprehensive implementation strategy for these two decisions. Now, we now have an implementation strategy for these two decisions, which will be implemented at three levels: at the national level, at the regional level, and at the continental level. So it is the implementation strategy that we need the private sector not just to validate, but actually to help input into.
Dr. Seth Ajay-Ba, acting president of the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, commented on the role of the private sector to drive growth and development in Africa.
Distinguished guests, the role of the private sector to drive growth cannot be overemphasized. In this regard, there is room to spearhead the process of implementing private sector development strategy to provide a vehicle for harnessing public, private, and donor resources for catalyzing growth and development to private sector in Africa. As you are aware, many African countries have given high prominence to export, diversification, and value addition, including facilitating the implementation of key activities on export expansion and diversification. It is therefore imperative that Africa gives adequate attention to diversification of products and markets in order to take advantage of the international opportunities. The Continental Free Trade Area is one instrument that will help Africa grow and create jobs. Now we have a chance to go big and to get it right. I believe that events, forces, and agendas are converging to create opportunity for progress that we haven't seen in a long time.
Following a presentation on the process of negotiating the Continental Free Trade Area and boosting intra-African trade, a Memorandum of Understanding was signed between the African Union Commission and the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Participants of the conference were then divided into 6 discussion panels focusing on 6 different topics, specifically trade policy, trade facilitation, productive capacity, trade-related infrastructure, trade finance, and factor market integration. The consensus of each discussion panel was presented by the lead discussants on the second day of the conference.
We agreed that I think we need, for us to be able to mainstream the trade policy, we will need a strong political will and commitment at the highest level possible. But this will require also the private sector to impress upon, also to lobby the government to be able to commit on specific aspect of mainstreaming the trade policy. The other issue also we agreed upon is that we need a very good consultative process, especially for stakeholders, so that at least we can all of us participate in the mainstreaming of the policy. Specifically, the process should be institutionalized both at the national, regional, and also at the continental level. That is maybe coming up with this maybe consultative dialogue framework where I think we will have participation of the rest of the stakeholders. And also, I think that with that, it would be good for the private sector to discuss with the respective governments so that they can now get the specific role in terms of the process of consultation.
The governments, according to the meeting, should remove import bans that are a barrier for inter-regional trade, but some noted that the removal of such bans are on an MFN basis. So it means if you remove an import ban, you also do it for extra African trade. And I think Jas was very good to note, you know, if you have measures that when you implement them and they actually benefit more the foreigners, then you know you should be warned. So import bans, the removal is in principle the meeting thought it is okay, but it should be looked at a case-by-case basis because who is actually then going to benefit from the removal of the import bans?
We don't manufacture anything in Africa. I mean, we do, but it's not enough. We export everything we produce, and we also import everything we consume. So this has to change. In order to do that, we should build our economies of scales, grow from small, medium enterprises into big regional entities, in order to reduce the cost of production and make our goods cheaper. So I think this is what we got. Thank you.
My name is Ali Mahmoud. I'm from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Sudan. I currently work for the Islamic Development Bank in the Department of Cooperation and Regional Integration. I was the moderator of this session. Unfortunately, the discussant did not show up. And in fact, we were in a position where we had to depend on contribution from the participants. And in fact, some of the participants really wanted to have the paper and listen to the AU contribution to this, and we ended up having an informal discussion on what we could do. And the recommendations I came up from the discussion we had on the need to improve the related infrastructure in Africa as a cornerstone of becoming competitive regionally and then to move to the globe is my own responsibility. One of the recommendations is infrastructure planning should take into account regional integration objectives, actual demographics, and not necessarily follow colonial patterns. A good example is what we heard this morning during the presentation by our colleague from Ethiopia Railways on the railway connecting Mombasa with the East African region. Second recommendation, infrastructure can be developed on a private partnership, public-private partnership basis, where the private sector injects money and takes some of the investment risks. Participants stressed in particular that ICT sector where private sector could play a major role. The third recommendation, Mr. Chairman, is the session highlighted the issue of lack of trade information and the need to organize more fairs inside Africa other than doing fairs outside. Some participants refer to the fact that a lot of business community in some African countries are not aware of the products available in neighboring countries. And this is an area where some work should be done, and I believe PACCI could play a pivotal role in this. Another recommendation, Mr. Chairman, is there was a need to nurture homegrown national and regional African banks and private to provide for a regulatory framework to support that. Also, participants noted and welcomed the development of regional energy networks such as the East African Power Pool and the Central African Power Pool, and recommended that African governments and the private sector participate in these developments. Overall, the session, Mr. Chairman, noted the need to come up with innovative ways to finance Africa's growing infrastructure requirements, whether in electricity, roads, ICT. I made reference in the session to the recent initiative by the Emir of Kuwait during the Afro-Arab Summit last week. He made a commitment of $1 billion to assist in the development of Africa for the next 5 years. I believe African countries should make sure that a huge amount of this money should go to infrastructure-related projects. This is what I have, Mr. Chairman, and I apologize for our two colleagues who were in the session yesterday for the fact that we did not have the paper by the discussion, but inshallah we promise to address this issue in the future. And I have received the presentation just before I came to the meeting, and I will distribute it to them. Thank you.
One of the best methods to finance trade in Africa is to actually inform the private sector on the instruments that can support them to achieve greater roles in international trade. And we came to also recommend that government should provide some incentives to the private sector so that they can actually increase their volume of trade by either creating a fund that can be accessed by business operators.
We have a saying that trade unites nations. So if we really want to trade with each other, the borders will open up and free movement of people, capital, goods, and services will be much, much easier. And of course, the various transport infrastructures that, the corridors that we have just seen here, the Ethiopian Railways Corporation has just showed us what it intends to do over time. We have a similar arrangement in, I think, in East Africa, where we are connecting the Indian Ocean to the Atlantic over time through the LAM transport corridor, or we call it LAPSET. So those also are going to be useful to ensure that we have borderless or seamless Africa, so that we can achieve that CFTA.
Following the detailed presentations from the lead discussants, Dr. Seth Ajay-Ba closed the conference by thanking everyone for their active participation on behalf of the Pan-African Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Executive Council, and national members, and added a few encouraging remarks.
I want to say that the success of our integration benefits the private sector more than any other government. If business is good for us. Therefore, the need for us to champion the cause of it to make sure that we are able to succeed. If we're able to do that, Africa will come together, our people will be alleviated from poverty. At the end of it all is the private sector, the entrepreneurs who are going to benefit, because we are going to expand our businesses and create wealth for ourselves and our continent.